God of War, a phrase that's a little bit ambiguous these days. It can mean the game, the series, or the other game, which is why I prefer to call the latter Dad of Boy, just to make it easy. God of War, as you may recall, is one of my favorite franchises. You know what? Screw it. It is my favorite franchise. It's one of the rare instances of a series that I have pretty much nothing bad to say about. I mean, yeah, Ascension was pretty mediocre compared to the other games, but had it not been in the position of having to be compared to things like God of War 3, it would have been a lot more favorably received. With that said, recently I finally got around to playing all the way through Dad of Boy. I've been a busy person, so the promise of a 20+ hour experience was a bit intimidating to me, but now that I've played it, I can safely say that it's a friggin' excellent game. I won't go too deep into my opinions because this ain't a review, but to give my quick thoughts, the game was slow to start, but once it got going, I thought it was a solid experience both from a gameplay standpoint and a narrative standpoint. It's kind of incomparable to the rest of the God of War series before it though, because it's so radically different, so as far as ranking it, Dad of Boy has to be put in its own category. I stand by my stance that it's the video game equivalent of Oscar bait, but that's never been a bad thing. And on an unrelated note, because the series has always tried to avoid anachronistic dialogue, it's really weird to hear characters in God of War swear.
I can enhance her for you right now if it so pleases you, son of a bitch.
Yeah. That said, what I find most noteworthy about Dad of Boy when you examine it is that it's clear that it's attempting to be an introductory game, one that's trying to appeal to a more general audience not necessarily familiar with the original run of games. Even if you've never picked up another God of War game, they show you exactly what you need to know in order to understand where Kratos is coming from, but leaves enough unsaid that it doesn't feel like they're bogging themselves down in the previous era, giving a fairly standalone complete experience. You may be asking yourself, who's playing this game that isn't familiar with the series? Well, as it turns out, lots of people, because based on some research, I found that God of War PS4 actually outsold the entire rest of the series combined. At time of writing, Dad of Boy has sold 19.5 million copies, and if these figures are correct, the rest of the series, not counting remasters, sold a combined 19.09 million units. And with the recent PC release, that gap is only going to widen. So statistically speaking, the majority of people who bought God of War PS4 have never even touched the rest of the series, and to me, that's tragic. It honestly leads me to believe that the reason so many people are so quick to declare God of War only became good or deep with PS4 is because of ignorance or hearsay. Granted, there are plenty of people who will say that Dad of Boy is a bastardization of God of War, and hey, fair enough if you believe either of these viewpoints, it's a free country, but I personally believe that these are both equally wrong. Multiple things can be good at the same time, and I don't think we have to tear things down to build other things up. In fact, I submit for the consideration of longtime players and people brand new to the series that not only are both styles of God of War great, both are actually made better for having the other, because while playing through God of War on PS4, I realized that to the people like me who have been with God of War since the beginning or near the beginning, like peanut butter and jelly, the experience of the two actually complements each other. How so? Well, like a well-made tequila sunrise, it has multiple layers. Damn, I'm going combo mad with these similes. At the top layer comes the most obvious thing, the fan service. Now, I don't want to focus on this too much because it's an important yet shallow topic. But you can't have a discussion on how the experience of God of War PS4 is enhanced by the original run of games without bringing it up. This game leads you to believe that it's trying to ignore the past at first. I'd say for about the first third, maybe even going up to the first half of the game, they almost go out of their way to avoid connections to their past other than the fact that Kratos is in the game. You'd almost think they were ashamed of the past. That is until the Helheim chapter. You see, because throughout the entire game up to that point, Atreus is dealing with some sort of mysterious illness brought on by his inability to control his godly powers or even understand them. It has to do with his conflicting nature. It's really confusing. Either way, after the boss fight with Thor's kids, Magni and Modi, Atreus falls into a coma and the only thing that can save him is in the depths of Helheim, a place that even Odin wouldn't dare step foot. But hey, Kratos is no stranger to visiting the afterlife for a cup of coffee. But as Freya puts it,
"It is a land of unyielding cold. Fires cannot burn there, and no magic in all the 9 realms can create a blaze. As for the dead, your frost axe will be useless. You'll need to find something else."
So he now has to awaken a past that he spent so many years running from. To those of us who know what's up, you're thinking, no way. Unfortunately, I had the next part of the game spoiled for me, but you come to appreciate just how much they made you think they were ignoring the past when Athena finally shows up. Had it not been spoiled for me, this entire scene would have been my version of Captain America picking up Mjolnir, and with that, he goes back home to dig up the Blades of Chaos. The weapons that represent the past that he spent so long trying to get away from, but a past that follows him wherever he goes.
There is one unavoidable truth you will never escape. You cannot change. You will always be a monster.
I know. But I am your monster no longer.
Mamma mia, that is a good-ass scene. And once that particular cherry is broken, they spend the rest of the game throwing occasional nods to the past games, visions of the past, relics of the old age, etc, etc, etc. It always makes contextual sense, and even if you don't specifically know what's happening, you can always get an idea of what's going on and why it matters. But as a veteran of the series, every single one of these references made me do the Leonardo DiCaprio point from that one meme. This is the fan service that a game like this is practically tailor-made for, and it's made even more rewarding because of that aforementioned bait and switch for the first portion of the game. But I wanted to get that one out of the way quickly because on the surface, it's certainly rewarding and, you know, friggin' sweet, but it's not as important as the lower layer of this Tequila Sunrise, because a lot of the elements of the original run of games that enhance the PS4 game are subtextual, you know, things that aren't immediately obvious. While God of War on PS4 is an extremely story-heavy game, the majority of the story can be boiled down to 3 key points: the mutual growth between Kratos and his son, Kratos' internal struggles with himself and the world around him, and finally the conflict with Baldur. So if you've never played any of the other games in the series and just picked this one up because it was the big PS4 game that was out, who exactly is Kratos? Well, he's abrasive, stoic, rude, secretive, has a 1,000-yard stare, is sometimes unreasonable, he has no patience, and so on. But if you've played the rest of the series, you get a much more complete experience because you start to see the deeper meaning behind who Kratos is, why he is the way he is, and why he does what he does, making him a much more likable, complete character despite of, and indeed because of all the atrocities he committed in the original run of games. Now, a lot of time has passed between the end of God of War 3 and Dad of Boy. How long, you may ask? Well, nobody quite knows the answer to this, but some very savvy people have given us a possible range. In particular, Reddit user Interfederational, who calculated his age as being roughly between 1047 and 1051 years old, because the destructive events of God of War 3 were likely the in-universe equivalent of the earthquake that destroyed Sparta in 464 BC, where Dad of Boy ends with Fimbulwinter, the story of which was based off the volcanic winter that started in 536 AD, where a series of eruptions caused a multi-year catastrophic temperature drop that killed millions. There's more to this event, but that's the simple version. I don't know for sure if this is the correct answer, it could have been less than 100 years for all we know, but I'm just gonna use this as the metric of time for simplicity's sake. No way Kratos can live to over 1,000, you may say, but it makes sense, he's a demigod after all. Although they do just straight up refer to him as a god in this game, so the line is slightly blurred. Either way, while he may not look it, old age can't stop this genetic freak. He can theoretically die of physical trauma, but not much else. Considering how young Atreus seems to be, it communicates that Kratos was in exile for over 1,000 years. But the key word there is exile. He wasn't hiding, he wasn't living quietly, he was specifically in self-exile. This point is communicated to the players by all his default equipment being labeled the X and Y of Exile, which is incidentally the same name his chain blades had in God of War 3. So right from the beginning, it shows the player how he feels about his past, the monster he used to be. If you interpret the ending to God of War 3 the same way I do, this makes sense, because I've always seen God of War 3 as the culmination of the previous games causing Kratos to descend into monstrosity. A descent that continues until the final moments of Zeus's life, where Kratos is literally and figuratively blinded by fury. And as soon as the screen clears, the monster Kratos dies along with his revenge, and the man Kratos is reborn. Only then is he able to see the destruction that he wrought. But one of the key themes that surrounds Kratos in Dad of Boy is control, because one of the things that he's learned in his many years since he lost control of his rage and destroyed his homeland is that the rage, the monster that's inside him, can be a great tool if directed properly. He is told that he hasn't changed or he'll never be able to change, and in a way that's correct, he'll never not be the ghost of Sparta, but he's learned to control his emotions that used to control him, so that he can direct them in a more productive direction, which is one of the reasons why he gets so frustrated with Atreus. Because more than anything, the lesson that Kratos is trying to hammer into Atreus is control.
You lost control.
That thing was trying to kill us. It's not like you don't get angry in a fight.
Anger can be a weapon. If you control it, use it. You clearly cannot.
Parallelism is one of the themes that this game works with because so much of Kratos' past is thrown back at him through other people. Atreus is young, angry, and constantly losing it. There are times when Kratos is referring to Atreus and scolding him for something, and you can almost hear him talking to a younger version of himself.
You will listen to me and not speak a word. I am your father, and you, boy, are not yourself. You are too quick to temper. You are rash, insubordinate, and out of control. This will not stand. You will honor your mother and abandon this path you have chosen. It is not too late.
Kratos wants Atreus to be a better person than Kratos was because he knows what Atreus is capable of. He's capable of everything that Kratos is, possibly even more, and he wants a better future for his only son, to end the cycle of needless violence. For a long time, all Kratos knew was senseless violence, and look at what good it did him. The death of his wife and child, PTSD, years upon years of suffering. Quite frankly, if you've never played any of the other games, you'd be mistaken for thinking that Kratos is simply a bad parent because he's stern, unreasonable, distant, brash, and arguably neglectful towards his son. Something that Atreus rightfully believes as well. I remember audibly gasping at this moment when Kratos steps into the light of Alfheim and hears some sort of internal monologue from Atreus.
He doesn't talk to me. Doesn't teach me. It should have been him. Do you hear me? Him, not you.
So in no uncertain terms, he basically said that he wanted his father to die instead of his mother. Something that Kratos isn't exactly unworthy of on the surface. In fact, it's shown early on that he has been almost a non-factor in his son's life altogether. There's this one bit of dialogue that really hits home this fact.
What you want?
What she knew.
Show me.
Now?
Now.
It always seems to be what his mother taught him, not what Kratos taught him. But if you're familiar with God of War, you'd realize that his distant attitude towards his son, his hesitation to get to know him, it's not a demonstration of hatred or contempt. Quite the opposite, as a matter of fact. One by one, everything Kratos has ever loved has died because of him. Including, before Atreus, his only child, Calliope. So with that knowledge, you can see that he's trying to keep his distance because he's petrified at the thought of history repeating itself and him losing the last bit of family he has, possibly by his own hands. And he doesn't want to let his guard down and grow close to Atreus for the same reason, because of how much loss he's felt. He doesn't want to grow emotionally attached to something that he fears he could lose. He wants to, but it's so hard for him. Something they show with admirable subtlety. He's staying distant for the sake of both of them. While he may rarely show it, he does love his son and would do anything to protect him. He doesn't go to literal hell and back for just anyone. Actually, thinking about it, something similar happened in Chains of Olympus as well. If you've only played this game, you'll see just a brick wall of a father gradually softening up, but the context that the rest of the series gives you of Kratos being a broken man desperately trying to open up but constantly having to carry a darkness around him wherever he goes that follows him no matter how hard he tries to run away from it, a darkness that prevents him from opening up or moving on with his life no matter how hard he wants to or tries, it makes his relationship with Atreus all the more tragic and sympathetic. In fact, pretty much every interaction reveals some beautiful context into how his former life has informed the person he is and the outlook on the world he has right now. How much of this would you miss by only having played this game? Honestly, quite a bit. Let's take his mistrust of the gods. God of War PS4 does a good job at expressing how the gods aren't to be trusted. Such is the entire opening chapter, but when you have the context that nearly every single divine being who have ever come into contact with Kratos has tried to screw him over, and the ones who didn't just try to plain old screw him, it makes a lot more sense. Even as early as his childhood, the gods kidnapped his brother. Then you have the uncomfortable business with Ares, the refusal to alleviate his pain or let himself do it, the endless betrayals and attempts to kill Kratos, the assurance that he would eternally be tortured in Hades for daring to not step in line for all these things he never asked for, and so on and so on and so on. I'd say he's a little far beyond mistrust of the gods. In fact, I'm surprised he didn't stab Freya in the neck the moment he found out she was a god, but that also builds into how much Kratos has grown as a character. He doesn't immediately lash out when Freya's nature is revealed. He gives her probably more benefit of the doubt than she deserves, because despite her good nature, there's a lot of things that she's not telling Kratos. But then again, Kratos has no room to throw stones in that regard. But the point where Kratos' growth as a character, as informed by the previous games, as well as the themes of parallelism, are put into the brightest spotlight is with the main antagonist, Baldur. who is far too much like Kratos for it to be a coincidence. They were both wronged by their family, they both want or wanted revenge beyond any sane rationale, they're both capable of being ruthless killing machines, they both want or wanted to be freed from their own curse. In Kratos' case, it was the memories that haunted him, and in Baldur's case, it's a literal curse that his mother put on him that makes him invincible, but also makes it impossible for him to feel anything, putting him into a waking nightmare. Hell, they're both heavily covered in tattoos. Baldur's tattoos are even blue, the same color that Kratos' tattoos were in his beta design. I don't think that was a coincidence. As a longtime fan, you can interpret a lot from this. What Kratos sees in Baldur is a dark reflection, the same person that Kratos has been trying to get away from for 1,000 years, the ghost of Sparta, the person he used to be. With that in mind, this one moment in particular is some of the most rewarding storytelling I've ever seen.
This path you walk, vengeance, you will find no peace. I know.
You will find no peace. Damn, that is a revealing line, because it perfectly summarizes what his overall arc has been, his dwelling and ultimate attempts to escape his past. He's always felt great shame for his reputation, even as far back as the first game. He hated being seen as the ghost of Sparta, and the shame and regret that he feels for everything he's done has simmered for all those years. The revenge he fought so hard to achieve has brought him nothing but emptiness. And to actually have experienced that and see the state it's left him in, how it's changed him, and how it's all coming to a head right here, it makes this climax mean so much more. He's not just fighting a boss, he's trying to save someone who's going down the same path that he regrets ever having gone down. The way I see it, all of this is why Kratos gives Baldur so many chances to be better. Even as late as the final boss, or even the post-final boss when Kratos and Baldur have beaten each other within an inch of their lives, Kratos gives Baldur the chance to be the thing that Kratos was never able to be, the bigger man. Kratos has at times not hesitated to kill gods that he's had less of a grudge against, but in this case, Baldur was the one to throw the first punch. Not only that, but he also threatened Kratos' son. So realistically speaking, Kratos had a lot more motive to kill Baldur than most, but still gave him the chance to make it right. And that right there shows how far Kratos has come in the past however many years, but he could not save Baldur from the same path he walked. Baldur still chooses his irrational hatred over human compassion, leaving Kratos no choice. We can talk about the big ideas or the minute details, but everything about the original run of God of War games that enhances the PS4 game comes down to the element of context. To me, seeing what happens in this game, seeing Kratos gradually open up to his son and the mutual growth that they experience, the process of Kratos learning to move on from his past and accept his sins, his successes and failures of making the people around him be better than himself and preventing them from making the same mistakes that he did, the themes of parallelism and control, I see this as the culmination of the entire series. That is why it was almost a tear-jerking moment to see Kratos shed his bandages at the end. That was him letting go of everything. The sins of his past, everything he held inside. He truly had nothing left to hide. This entire scene is honestly just perfect. And yeah, it's a great scene on its own merits with the context of just this game, but the uncomfortable nature of his fall from grace and descent into monstrosity only makes his eventual redemption feel all that more earned. I guess after all this is said and done, is he redeemed? I don't know. That's all up to personal discretion. But either way, this scene in a nutshell is why God of War on PS4 is enhanced by the original run of God of War games and vice versa. They give you a deeper, more complete insight into the character of Kratos in PS4. They form a perfect yin-yang and a complete 7-game character arc, a journey that spanned nearly a decade and a half. You know, you'd think the jarring shift would make Dad of Boy a worse experience, but honestly I think the opposite is true. I think it honestly would have been disappointing if God of War didn't change. After 6 games, the formula was dangerously close to wearing thin. Hell, it already had to some people. And after a 5-year gap, more of the same was the worst thing it could have been. I'm glad that God of War on PS4 exists for how it evolves the series, and I'm glad that God of War is still going strong. In fact, even though I've been a Sony kid since I was 6, I'm glad to see that more people are able to enjoy this series with the PC port coming out. I'm glad to see that exclusivity is by and large a thing of the past. We're still a ways off from Ragnarok, but I still look forward to playing that game in 5 or 6 years when it comes down to a price I'm willing to pay because I'm a perennial cheap ass. Either way, while I may prefer God of War 1 through Ascension over New God of War, I think they're both great, and there's no reason we can't enjoy both of them. And with that, I've been the King of Snark Style on Tactical Bacon Productions, and I will see you next time. Actually, before we go, there was one bit in the video that I cut due to being slightly redundant, but it was also a topic that I really wanted to include in some way, so I thought I'd include it at the end here as sort of a bit of a deleted scene. Enjoy! At various points through this game, he's either forced or chooses to reveal bits of his past to his son. At first, he does so by proxy, most notably in one of my favorite conversations in the game. An easily missable optional dialogue about a horse, a stag, and a hunter.
There was a horse. The horse sought vengeance upon his enemy, a stag. But he could not kill the stag alone. The horse met a man, a hunter, and made a deal. He took the man's bit and bridle and allowed him to ride in a saddle on his back. Together, they killed the stag, and the horse tasted victory. But the hunter would not release the horse, and made a slave of him.
So getting revenge cost him his freedom. Hope it was worth it.
It was not.
But then eventually, he's forced to reveal details directly, and sometimes these details are revealed against his will.
Come on, we gotta go!
You saw.
There's no time, look!
The sight of his younger self beating Zeus freezes him where he stands. And that's it. See you next time.